Welcome to episode 2 of our podcast. We're still working on a
The
name, but
Anime Bros Fight Cast or whatever.
yeah, in my notes I've been labeling it as Anibros, but
Yeah, that's.
I have the feeling that there's got to be at least like 10 other podcasts like that.
I'm sure we're not unique. Yes, I guess you're probably right in that our branding should be something about how we fight all the time.
Yeah, right. But
Are very
it's very
contradictory.
difficult to pick fight words in anime that aren't like.
I mean, there's you're just not gonna win a fight about an anime name. Because there's 50 million pods of weebs who think they're better than like everyone else. Everyone's pretentious, and
Ah,
I am the most pretentious of them. So
you're talking about us. I see.
I mean, I listened to quite a few pods.
I have no
And
doubt.
obviously, I'm going to be sharing this with some of my friends from, other ones.
All right. Well, I can't
So
wait to actually put some
I'm
of
sure
these out then.
I'm sure for them, like none of this is new, because boy, have I, my opinions on isekai are quite well known.
Well,
Like it's
I
not a
mean, it's
secret.
different when you're talking in like a Discord server versus when
Oh
you're
sure.
like, you're sending them like a thing you've put out on the internet, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I think definitely a podcast is definitely like much more of a
Oh, we should introduce
involved.
ourselves, by the way.
Yes, I'm Saw,
I'm Nujum. The picture, if you're watching the YouTube, I assume we're gonna put this on like an actual podcast site
yeah.
eventually. But for the
Uh,
YouTube,
we'll
uh,
have to have like a Patreon because I'm not spending Libsyn money just on my own volition.
yeah, understandable. So on the YouTube, the left sort of icon is me, Najum, which is the redhead girl from my Pokemon avatar from Sword and Shield, and then
Hmm.
right is
The one
Saz.
that you got for me,
Yeah. Shout out to the oh shoot, what
artist.
is the
Do you
artist's
know they're
name?
at? I don't, because I wasn't involved in
It's
this pretty much at
V
all.
Nex, something along that line.
Like Phoenix, that's pretty
No, so it's
nice.
VNEX is the artist. I found her on Reddit. I got both of these for $45 each. They were pretty good. Actually, I think yours was cheaper because you have an Eevee, and I asked for double. And double's
Oh
like,
wow,
yeah, she was like,
much more
she
complicated
charged
of a design.
per
That's
Pokemon
also
size.
probably. I'm sure everyone gets like an EV request if you're a Pokemon artist.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
So like you
She
just have
made your
experience
Eevee
with
really
that.
cute. I
Uh-huh.
still remember when I like contacted her first. I did mine first, right? I was
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, I want this double that I have in my game. The first thing she said was, oh man, you want a chonker. I was like, I'm gonna vibe with this one.
Definitely.
So yeah, V next on Reddit. I'll get her social media
Yeah,
for
include
the.
her ad in like the summary and everything.
Yeah, that'll be cool. So okay,
Just
we have two shows we want to talk about.
and before we
Slime
talk
Tao
about them,
Shite 300 Nen Shiran. Okay, we need to start something here. I'm I'm fine saying Japanese names until they're like these like really long ones, and then it just gets like really annoying. Like one of the shows we're talking about, Three Gatsu no Lion, totally fine
yeah.
with that. The
To be fair, I think that's a slightly longer one, and also there's the added complexity in that the English name is not very intuitive either, because it's March comes in like a lion. So like
Ooh, do you know
a
the
lot of
story
these.
behind it?
It's not like it's not super relevant to like the plot of the show or anything. It's just it's
It's
just like
so
an
cute
additional
though.
thing.
When I learned about it, I was like, "Oh, we gotta bring this up on the podcast."
It's a very it's a cute show. Yeah,
No,
I
no,
enjoy
the
it.
name thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, so this is if we're actually getting into it already.
Okay, so
Ueno
the
Chico
other
is
show
the
is
Honey and
I
Clover
spent
is the
300
show.
years killing slime and maxed out my level.
Yeah, that
And I guess we'll just do like a little. Tell you what, you can introduce yours and I'll introduce mine. Uh,
um
and then we'll go from there into the discussion.
yeah, why not? So I brought mine up. So Nujum mentioned that the reason he recommended this to me was because he appreciated the found family aspect to it. And I was like, well, let's get hot and heavy, and I'll just straight up bring up the biggest, like my favorite found family media,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
this one's. I'm gonna spoil it right now. We're definitely gonna talk about yours more than mine.
well, okay. I mentioned earlier. Well, I'll get into it later, but so yeah, Three Gatsu is it's just one of my favorites. So I thought, well, why not bring it on? Because obviously, I think we mentioned last time that I've seen quite a bit more. So usually, I'll be the one trying to triangulate, a good rebuttal anime, and
Hmm.
then
So for a little bit of context, the way we started these podcasts is we was like, okay, I'll recommend an anime and you'll recommend an anime,
mhm,
and we'll just sort of bounce off the ideas and compare them during the show.
mhm.
So for this one, Three Gatsu no Lion, how would you describe it? Because there are two descriptions of it that I've seen, and they're
So
not too different, but
there
there's one major aspect of them that
so
I'll
there
let you
are
go for it.
plenty of sports anime out there, and everyone's seen the more shonen battle-y shonens that are or sports animes that are like you have your more realistic ones with Haikyuu, you have your like less realistic ones with like Kuroko no Basket. Everyone wants to do a good sports anime, and those are usually like super highly appealing. And Three Gatsu is not quite that because it is much more
Yeah,
of
I would say even bringing up sports anime is kind of questionable because this is not
it's
not.
much more relevant like later on.
Oh, maybe
So
later. Okay, so I've watched 4 episodes of this to
that's
be
it.
clear.
It is a majority of a drama where a lot of the focus is on our main character's mental health and state. Rather than focus, that's sort of like the
The whole show, yeah.
yeah, it's the underlying aspect
So
that
the
comes
main
forward.
character is Rei Kiriyama,
Mhm.
and
The
uh,
show starts off with zero because Ray means zero and just like nothing. You're nothing from which is an abusive statement from his foster sister. Uh,
oh,
very intense okay, yeah, that's one thing that sort of I have to qualify this anime with when I usually recommend it is the first episode is quite a bit more artsy and it gets a lot more grounded much quickly. There is it does maintain that sort of artsiness throughout, but the first episode is a major overload of it and you kind of have to work through that to actually get into it.
I'm not gonna lie to you though. I was really into the sort of artsy style. The first scene we get is like him very clearly like struggling in his own mind. There's like all the white everywhere.
Oh yeah, I
I
love
mean
it. I
like
mean, but it's also just a thing that has put people off, and I understand because especially again, this author is pretty prolific, with Honey and Clover. And honestly, if so, this is just like a few lines about Honey and Clover. If you like Honey and Clover, you ought to like Three Gatsu, but I think March Comes In Like a Lion is so much more like focused, and it kind of just makes more sense because Honey and Clover is a college, a bunch of college drama, whereas this is I think it's more refined. So if you like that, you'll like this. Um,
I think your knowledge of anime is hurting you a little bit because I know nothing about Three
Honey and
Gatsu,
Clover.
and just the sound of the name Three Honey No Clover kind of turns me off.
uh, that's weird, but okay. I
Uh, to talk a little bit more about Three Gatsu, like just so I've watched 3 episodes of it, and I have to say, I absolutely love it. This is the kind of show that I feel like everyone wants to watch, if that makes sense. It's the kind of show that's really thoughtful, and you can tell that like whoever wrote it clearly had something to say, right?
oh
Like
yeah, totally.
there's a message here. There's a story being told. Uh,
I'm not gonna spoil anything, but
yeah, yeah, no, don't, because I'm definitely gonna at least watch season 1. I don't know if I'll keep going because it seems like it goes for quite a while.
it's very emotionally investing. Like you really I have my
I'm gonna
complaints.
turn both of us down because
Yeah,
the we're getting a lot of red for some reason on
sure.
the OBS. We'll see if we actually have to use the other audio. Sorry,
Yeah,
go on.
yeah, it was. Yeah, I just I have my complaints. Like there are things I could point out that are slightly less like cleanly done. Like I don't like I but for the most part I just it's just really solid. Like there's no other drama sports that really like actually meshes the two very like well and
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
and
like this show isn't really like, at least from what I've seen, there's basically nothing to do with the sport. It's all about Ray and his relationships with other characters, and obviously his battle with what would you say he is struggling with in this
oh
show?
is you sort of get a sense. This is like slightly spoilery, but I'm sure the imagery is
Oh,
sort of
okay, yeah.
conveyed
So
already.
like
Um,
totally spoilers coming up.
you get a lot of sense that he's like he dissociates occasionally, like, and it's very like straightforwardly. Besides that, there's just the obvious like depression, like, and then there's just like a very there's a through line about abuse in there that doesn't come up for a little bit, but you'll see a little bit of it, and that's it's just it is intense, and so if
I would agree with you that depression is the word I would use for it. And
yep.
I'll tell you what the oh, this is something we should have talked about off camera. How comfortable are you getting personal with this show
Oh
talking?
well,
It's episode 2, so I feel like
episode
we
two.
don't want to get too personal, but I think
I don't mind. I'm not usually secretive about anything, but
so I think, and we haven't really talked about this, but like I think both of us have had bouts of depression, but I
oh
think
I've
you
just
had it a lot worse than I did.
oh man, it was real bad. Like we're not gonna get into it yet, but oof.
Yeah. So okay, so you don't want to like get too deep.
No,
Well,
I'm not.
going back to the show real quick. The way Ray's depression is shown is mostly through how he talks and how he uh spends his time with other people. The show is sort of like, it feels very divided in these two different parts where part of the show is Ray sort of being by himself, like he'll be, walking by a river, he'll be in his room waking up, and he'll have these sort of monologue moments, right, where he'll be like, "Ah, yes, I love the color blue. Ah, deep thoughts." And
You
then
can
the
even get
other
like the vibe and the color grade of the show. Like it's so like gray and blue and
Yeah, yeah, it
like
like dulls out, and it's kind of interesting because like often like with the river one, I think it's like episode 2. He walks by a river, and the river is fucking so pretty. Like whoever drew the
yeah.
show, great job. But you sort of understand there's like a quietness to it that like I think is really really well done. And then the other part of the show, which contrasts really greatly with it, is when Ray interacts with anyone else. And it feels like every single character in this show is very loud, as if to just like make Ray feel as tiny as possible.
Yeah, everyone just has so much Genki energy like around him, and
Everyone's yelling, everyone's like doing stuff. It
mhm.
makes for from like a an entertainment perspective. I think it really helps the show because I think if you're when you're doing an artsy show, you don't want it to be too thoughtful. One, because you don't want to play your whole hand at once, right? You want to go through these motions and take things slow when you're developing your ideas.
Mhm. Especially for like Shaft, the studio that did it. Like Shaft can. So this is originally a light novel, and
Hmm.
Shaft does a lot of light novels. Obviously, the most popular one, Bakemonogatari. And they can go really ham with visuals in such a way that it takes away. I think, or no, it adds its own value, but it takes away from the
It's
original like.
like it's its own
And
thing, sort of.
yeah, so
So I
they're
think
just putting it out.
the loud bits on one hand they sort of help stretch out the really thoughtful moments and like spread out the talk about depression because that can get old really fast if you overuse it. But I think also what they do really well is they make it entertaining. Pretty much all of the moments where Ray is like not alone and with his own thoughts, he's like
Hmm.
it's like some sort of slapstick comedy stuff going on, right? Like someone's always like jumping or hitting things, or like there's always some problem that they're talking about, right? And there's a
Hmm.
certain humor here that I really appreciate, at least in the initial episodes.
I guess just to lay down the plot a little bit, like as it lays.
Yeah.
The Three Gatsu is about it's Rei Kiriyama, and he's a shogi player. He's a professional shogi player, even though he's pretty young.
Yeah,
Uh,
right? Like that, so like the age of these characters were really like putting me off. At first I thought Ray was like a high schooler. But then they make it clear that he's like drinking and stuff, and I'm like, oh wow, you're playing shogi professionally. He's doing pretty well
He,
from himself
I don't think
considering.
that's quite like the legal. He's quite legal age to drink.
Oh, I guess I don't know what the legal age 21 in Japan. I just made an assumption.
regardless, he's only like he's forced to drink like socially and like I
Yeah.
mean it's not necessarily legal, but also that he's being pushed. It's not because
Uh,
he. Uh,
is he being forced? I was under the impression that, at least in that first, I think
even
it's
here,
episode 2, where like one of his colleagues drags him out to drink. Uh,
even
I,
in
I
like
had I
America,
had the impression that that was a flashback scene.
there are plenty of ways that you can like subvert the drinking age, and so if your upperclassmen are making you drink, then or upper your coworkers,
Yeah, they're what? So you
it's
think
money.
what? I assume it's like they bought a drink for him and they were like, "Yo,
Yeah, drink it out of peer pressure
just
and
do
stuff.
it." Yeah,
Yeah. So he's not like 21, but he is older than you would think than a
I
high
see. I
schooler.
see.
So
So he's a
yeah.
shogi player, and while he's, uh, shall we say, out and about,
So
he go
sorry,
for it.
let me actually like lay it out. So he's living alone. He was raised by a foster
Yeah, we're
parent
only like
after
15 minutes into the episode. Let's actually like.
his his family is absent. You I don't think you've been told exactly what happened yet. But and like the very first episode is him beating his foster father at shogi. So you're like, okay, there's so he's accomplished something, but you're not entirely sure like the grounds of it. But it's apparently super like difficult for him. You get that through like his in once
His sort of
in
internal monologues and like just how
yeah
he
and
acts, really, right? You can tell he's got like something going on.
and then once he's done with his shogi stuff, he gets a text and it's like, hey, go pick up some, hey, come over for dinner.
Oh,
And
this
then
scene. Oh,
addition-
this scene is so good.
he's about to reject them, and then a second text comes in, hey, pick up some pickled vegetables for us, please. We don't
Is
have it.
this scene like well liked? Because let me tell you, it left quite the impression on me.
I wouldn't say it's super memorable, but it is it's a good establishing. I think the cinematography here is like it's pretty solid. Like the director here is just doing a good job at conveying
You don't
stuff
think
and
it's super
planning.
memorable? That
Oh
was
no,
like the one thing I remember from the show, if I'm being honest.
I mean I haven't watched it in a
That
while, but
and
I remember it. Yeah, of course, it's a good show. I like it,
it's a really good
and I
show.
mean
Go watch it.
it's just there are 50 episodes of it, so like there are more memorable moments than
I'm
I would say.
sure. No, so like this is like where I think in a show like this you kind of have to get personal to like really appreciate it, because like art like this is like almost meant to be taken as like a reflection of yourself, isn't it, when you're supposed to watch it?
Yeah.
So like he does this thing where like what's her name, Akari.
Akari is the oldest sister. Hina is okay. Did we mention that he goes over to? Yeah, so he's
Yeah,
called
so
over for
there are
dinner by
these
his
three
family.
sisters that he goes over to their house,
Hina's
and
the middle, and Momo's the youngest.
your sort of first introduction to them is him like after he's played shogi, he's on his phone and he gets a text like, "Hey, do you want to come over?" And he's about to type, "No, I'm feeling under the weather." And then she sends a second text where it was like, "Oh, can you get some
Veggies.
pickles, right?" No, it was pickled vegetables. So she's like, "Hey, can you pick up some pickled vegetables on the way there?" Which is so smart, right?
hmm
Like,
So Hina is a middle schooler, and her social awareness is pretty like it's maybe slightly advanced, but I think that's about appropriate.
oh,
Yeah.
was that Hina texting? Oh no, I thought it was
Yep.
Akari.
No. Akari is I don't think yeah his relationship with Tina ends up being like the more important one later. I think like obviously I think you've been through like his introduction, him meeting Akari,
Yeah.
but as it goes
So
on, like Hina's
the
not as
the episode I watched, episode 4. I mean, we'll
cool.
get
You
into
kept
that
going, huh?
later. But okay,
Yeah.
the thing about this scene that's so good is that like I think if you've ever like struggled with depression, I think the biggest thing that people talk about in terms of that is like is it disassociation, the thing you were mentioning
Well,
earlier?
he
This
does dissociate.
tendency to want to be by yourself, right?
I
This
think that's just that's just the general depression. Like you don't want to deal with things. You have a lethargy about you. Um, so
The
it,
lethargy was like the bigger thing for me when I was like going through it, right? Was that like I just didn't want to leave my room, and it's at some point it extended to the point of like I didn't want to play games because playing games was too much effort, right?
oh yeah,
And so like when he was about to reject it, I sort of had a moment of like, oh yeah, this is I've been here, I've done this 100,000 times, right? It's like, oh yeah, you could go there and it'd probably be fun, but you're just not feeling up to it, and that's quite sad, right? Well, and like, can I just say,
yeah. Go on.
what a brilliant way to introduce their relationship, because right away you can tell that whoever these people are, whether it's Hina or Akari, they are very clearly manipulating him, right? The show is like, it doesn't say anything, but it's very clear that like they know that he you sort of get the implication that they know him well enough to know that he can't say no to them, that he's way too polite, and they
Manipulating
want
is
him over,
for
right?
sure. Yeah, but yes, they are being like
It's
socially aware of
manipulation, but it's
his.
like the good kind, right? Where it's like they're helping him help himself in a sort of way,
They're aware of his they show a level of social awareness and of his kids
of his
issues and
problems, yeah, and they're working
yep,
around it, so to speak.
yep, definitely.
Really, really good scene. Really, really clever start to the show.
Yeah, and so he goes over to their house, and it's a very quaint and like small, cramped place, and it like contrasts because like in the beginning you see him alone in this pretty like sizable apartment, and then you have all these warm colors coming in, and you have like the soundtrack softens, and you get like a bit like there's like a flamenco guitar soundtrack that's it's
Yeah,
very
for sure. I'll tell you, like when I first saw this, I didn't realize that it was supposed to be a small place
oh it's so
until
small.
yeah, later on, like one of the rival character comes in. Hold on.
He's a I don't
Nakaido Harunobu. He's
oh
this big
Honorable,
fat
yeah.
guy who like plays shogi. Later on, he comes into the show and he like visits this house and he's like, "Oh, what a small place." And until that point, I hadn't really realized that. Oh yeah, it is a small place because, like you said, it is very warm and inviting, and it's where like all the fun stuff happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's they have so many cats, and it's a
All
very
the cats,
lively.
the cats are so good.
It's just such a strong like contrast to his daily life.
So
Anyway, it's
go ahead.
it's just you just so yeah, so you have the contrast between his daily life and then the very warm but like cramped life at the Kawamoto house that has been invited to,
Yeah.
and it's that sort of his relationships with people are the focus of the
So like,
show. Is just
is he living with
they're
people?
aware of
Because
his issues, and
I was
he finds support in them.
oh
It's a
I
very
believe it.
heartwarming show. You have like a bittersweetness in his like his situation is rough, but and that's sort of why I wanted to bring this anime up because it's just such a like it's such a well considered approach to like a found family. Like
Mm. Where like he see that like why he needs it. So
mhm.
when ah fuck I lost my point. Anyways, yeah. So in terms of like found family, you can definitely get the feeling that these sisters are doing a lot to support him, right? One thing I think that's really interesting about the show is that they make it clear that the sisters are not like necessarily doing great themselves. And
The you get a sense for their financial hardship already, yeah, and then
well, I would say less the financial hardship, but very clearly that they had also suffered loss, right?
oh yeah, was the Oban episode that early? I could have.
So okay, so to go over what I've watched, episode one was just sort of like an introduction to everything.
Hmm.
Episode two was the Akari backstory, how they first
Yeah,
met.
how they met.
Episode three was Hina crying at the riverside.
Oh,
Uh,
that was the Oban episode. Yeah,
okay, and then episode four is Hina confessing to the guy with the bento, or
or
giving,
trying to.
trying to, yes.
Yeah, that's a
Which, by
yeah.
the way, that episode four, there's a great scene where she's about to. So she tries to go, and Hina, being the middle schooler, she has like a boy she likes, and the whole episode is about how she's like preparing this bento, and she's being really ambitious for it, and like her older sister's telling her, "No, that's too much. You know, you need to leave
She's
by
listing out the ingredients and how ridiculous they are.
how
Like,
expensive it is, and like, you know, you need to leave by 9 o'clock. Can you get all this done?" She's like, "Oh, don't worry." She wakes up 2 hours early, and she still is like late.
and yeah, she takes on an ambitious project, and she fails. They
And
both.
all of this leads up to this sort of this scene towards the end of episode 4. And this is really the first like non-Ray scene with like a lot of emotional punch to it. I felt she tries to confess to this guy, but her voice is fairly small, and she gets pushed aside. And oh no, oh damn, she couldn't give it right.
Just misses her chance. Yeah.
And so you know they do a sort of zoom out, and you see everyone else walking away, and you see her. She's just sort of standing alone by herself, and the scene transitions, and you go to a trash can, and you watch as very slowly she starts to like lower her lunch into the trash can.
The big bento. Yeah.
And like, damn, dude, what a way to sell it, right? Like, you had all
Mhm.
this build up. I won't spoil what happens next. Go watch the show; it's really good. But
Yep.
it's like it's really heartfelt, and you can just like you can totally put yourself in her situation. Later on, she's like, you know, she's trying to justify why she almost throws it away. She's like, oh, but like sister would have asked about it, right? And it, you
Mhm.
know, it's this sort of thing where like she's trying to cover up her mistakes, and it's like, yeah, you know, like if I was in her position, I would totally feel the same. And you know, it
Yeah.
all makes so much sense, and it's so human and emotional. And I think that's why, like I said, like this is the kind of show that I think everyone wants to watch, is because it is so
Yeah.
good at being human.
Yeah, a good drama will really make you like feel the potential of at just the medium even. Like, and Umino Chica like totally nailed it. I think as far as the writing. Just,
So, from I've done a lot of talking now. What is it about this show for you that really like makes it special? What do you pay attention to when you're watching this?
I mean, I when I'm initially watching a show, usually it'll be like, the art and the soundtrack that'll draw me. I think
Mm-hmm.
obviously like the dramatic elements are very nice. It's maybe a little reliant on sort of coincidences in the writing. Like a lot of stuff that happens is maybe a little suspect if you were like trying to really logic it out. Like, oh, how does Kiriyama end up with them and it doesn't become okay, and then he never talks to them again. Like you sort of have the suspension of disbelief is not a problem really. Like it's pretty well done and considered. Um,
I
so
would agree, yeah. So
it's a
earlier I totally forgot to mention this. So I was talking about how there are two sort of descriptions for this show, and I mentioned to you
yeah.
before. I asked you like, what do you think is the problem that Ray is facing? The
Uh-huh.
reason I asked that is because when you look at the official description of Three Gatsu no Lion, it says,
Which I
let me
don't think I
see.
have actually.
Oh, I won't say the whole thing. Basically, it says that Ray is someone who is suffering from loneliness. And
Well, I
and,
mean that's
and
not
when I
wrong,
read
but
that, I was kind of taken aback. I was like, "What loneliness?" You know, to me, this whole thing was all about depression. And then I sort of like thought about it, like, "Oh man, maybe I'm letting my personal experiences bleed into it a little bit too much." But then I went and I read some of these comments on like the Reddit and stuff, and it seemed like everyone was on the same page I was, that like, no, this is a story about depression, right?
it's not wrong to say he is lonely, but it is also, being affected by loneliness is like a different sort of like yeah, like it's clearly more of a depression, whereas like a loneliness would involve like longing or yearning, where he doesn't really experience that so much.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the My Anime List one, and it's not saying the word loneliness. I don't know where. Oh no, yeah. Akari, the three oldest of the girls, is determined to combat Rei's loneliness and poorly sustained lifestyle with motherly hospitality.
This synopsis was written by someone who like watched the like first episode, I think, and that was it because it's not like the best.
Yeah, so
He
like
tends to take more care of himself. Well, that's not
I
wrong,
just
but
wanted to
also,
note
like, what are
that
you
because it
focusing on
seems
here?
consistent everywhere that I saw the
Yeah.
show be talked about, that like everyone is saying depression is the term that comes to mind.
Yeah, you know,
I do wonder if this was like an intentional move, maybe from whoever the author is. Maybe he didn't want people to like
he
think it was about depression. I don't know. You know, there's got to be some reason why it's
this
loneliness,
is
right?
it's just a bad synopsis. You know,
No, no, but this
it's
isn't
focused
the
on the wrong
only
things.
synopsis to use the word loneliness. On
Oh,
Crunchyroll, I
I'm sure
believe
there's
it
more. Like,
also says loneliness.
honestly, like, there's so many. Translated media is already like, once you've the fact that it had to come internationally, like people have to work on like translating stuff. Sort of like you've already lost a layer of meaning and a layer of like the barrier of like of entry to like how
So
much
you don't
work
think it's
people are willing
anything
to put in.
important? You just think, ah, whatever. It's just
Uh,
someone screwed up.
this is consistent. I'm saying like it's a trend. Like people do not the people who put in like synopsises for translated work, especially if it's not like licensed or anything, they're not gonna be putting in like an actual like a professional level of effort that you would expect from like a domestic show. Like you know, it's just sort of it's consistent with how people behave. You know.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay, I can accept that.
Anyway,
Still a little disappointing.
yeah, no, it's not great to have to not be able to trust synopsises. But like we have our issues with advertising too, with like trailers and stuff. Like
For
you can
sure.
never
For
trust
sure.
an anime PV is only going to be it is only going to be better than a trailer, I think, for an American show.
All right. I'm gonna get into my show a little bit. How
Okay, yeah, well,
much of 300 slime? I should say the full name is I've been killing slimes for 300 years and
300
maxed out my
years.
level. Or 300 years and maxed out my level. How much of this show did you watch?
Well, okay, so obviously I mentioned I watch, literally everything as every season. So I started off, way back when the season started for that, which I think was a season ago. Yeah, it was last season, I think. And I bumped off of it pretty quick on episode two, and then I had to watch it again for this. So
Hmm.
I watched episode three, and I did not watch any more.
I cannot blame you.
I abjectly refused.
I brought it up because I really did enjoy this show.
So I
And I think that's like you know, an easy thing to say, but you have to it's the sort of isekai thing where, you know, a lot of these relationships and stuff are not great and not well thought out.
not thought out. Yes,
However,
especially in contrast to one of the best dramas I've ever watched. Yes, I don't think this
what the
is as.
show does have is one. Okay, it honestly it's kind of like two different shows. So
Uh-huh.
episode one is kind of its own thing, and a little bit episode two. Like I would say, the first half of episode two sort of deals with this, where the focus of 300 slime is like right at the beginning. They open up with this, uh, almost like I don't know what you would call it, like a character breakdown of the main girl.
Hmm.
She is like an office worker, and she dies because she overworked
Overwork. Yeah.
herself, and she like she meets God, and the first thing she says to God is, "Listen, I just want an easy life." And
Can I
God's
stop
like,
you there and sort of disclaim what I wanted to start off the podcast with this, but I don't mind having to start with
"Okay,
Three
go."
Gatsu because so I have sort of this is an issue like I'll always run into when it comes to sort of talking about shows and stuff. When you're doing a critique, there's always going to be like a sort of pushback, like, well, I enjoyed the show and your critique therefore must be like a personal like it's a description of my personal taste or whatever. Like like critiquing a show is essentially critiquing my character,
Hmm.
and I think this is like it's very common. And I don't want to say like your feelings are bad, but the way you're engaging with the show is necessarily like it's too personal. Like if that is how you think of like any show, then like reevaluate how you engage with media. And again, I'm an elitist. Like you don't have to listen to me. You can just enjoy like you can take it personally and be angry about it on your own time. But if you're going to listen to this, I'm going to be critiquing stuff, and if you enjoy it, that's fine. But also my critique is not like a personal attack on you. It's when I critique something, I'm trying to be accurate to like the content of the show. Like when it has a flaw, and obviously like flaws are not like necessarily always like a bad thing. Like every single show is flawed. There's no perfect media out there, and people enjoy flawed media, like because there's no perfect media. Thereby, so my critique does not invalidate enjoyment of a show. Like you can enjoy whatever you want. Like turning your brain off is not like a bad thing.
Mm.
You're allowed to enjoy things
Yeah,
without
I
thinking.
definitely agree with
At the same time, because I sort of there's also a vice versa of this. Just because you enjoy something does not invalidate a critique of it. Like if your critique is accurate or not, that's always variable. But it's still like you're making a critique like in good faith. Like I'm not trying to say don't enjoy the show, but I am trying to accurately describe what the show is and its flaws. So
yeah, we just accept that this is like our opinion and stuff,
so
right?
that's my first that and I think that yeah everyone can agree to most people can agree to this that disclaimer. My second disclaimer is going to be quite a bit more difficult to understand in that when it comes to writing, all writing is to some extent contrived, and that is why this is why a suspension of disbelief is necessary. um, Suspension of disbelief because like when you're watching something, you're aware that you're watching fiction. You're not watching something that's actually there, but you can suspend your disbelief for a while to enjoy the show. That is just how you go about it. So when it comes to isekai, usually, and this is going to be a bit harsh, but they really don't care enough to really to give you any tools to suspend your disbelief. Like when if you are so hack as to have your character die, just a normal ass, probably an otaku, everyman character die, and then God comes down and God gives them powers and sends them to a new world. Are you really writing anything? That's not creativity. You're just making an excuse to start writing, from where you want to. You just want to get the wish fulfillment started when you have God come down. That's not God. That's just the writer. You the writer have come down into your work and said, "Hey, main character, I want you to have this and this." And that's sort of the very first impression I got from this was this cute little girl God, clearly written from the perspective of a horny old man who's like, I really like 17-year-old girls, so I'm gonna make you a 17-year-old girl, but also my God is gonna be like a cute little
Well, okay,
girl
so
also
to
because you're a
start
creep.
off a counterpoint.
No,
She
go
was a
ahead,
girl
Mark.
to start. Is it really that weird that she would want to be a
No,
17-year-old girl?
the issue is that
She
it's
she
obvious that the
explicitly
author is male.
wishes for eternal youth.
Well, you're arguing against my out of universe justification with an in universe thing. That doesn't really that doesn't scan. You can't say, well, she was a girl in universe when I'm saying the writer is a creep. Like the writer is the one who's weird as hell. Like this is a creative decision. All fictional worlds are infinitely mutable. Like you can always make a different decision. So when you as the writer
So
have
like,
self-inserted
if he
as
made a
a
boy, you would have no problem with it.
no, it's. I mean, I think if you've already like been so creatively driven as to have God start off your conflict, like you're already
Well, I
not
mean,
writing.
you're trying to set up an isekai here. You're not trying to like set up
Well,
three Gatsu no
okay,
Lion.
well,
It's a little different.
hear me out. This flaw might not be unique to this one show. I think a
Yeah,
lot
for
of
sure.
isekais start off with gods, which are
There are
just the
for
writer's
sure
self-insert.
multiple shows that start off with something along the lines of
Have you
character dies and makes a wish, right?
have you seen Yujo Senki?
Don't use Japanese names. I won't know shit.
Tanya, the saga of Tanya the Evil, for the love
No.
of God. Okay, this.
Have you
Okay
seen
then.
didn't I ask to have my abilities be average in the next life? Something like
I've
that?
seen goddamn every fucking isekai. Yes, I've seen make
That
my
that one has
abilities.
a similar thing where it starts
No,
off
see,
with her dying and
it's
making a
not just a
wish.
similar thing. This is a trend in literally like half of isekai, or almost all of
No,
them
no,
even.
yeah, I understand where you're going with this. You're trying to
And I
critique
think
this
it's
like
bad.
you
It's a
think
bad
it's
trend.
a
It's
bad
something
trend. You think it's a bad pattern. I
I think
don't
any writer
understand where
who.
this creep thing comes in, but I agree that
Well,
it
okay,
can be
he
very
is a creep.
lazy, right?
That's besides the creep thing, which is this author obviously is. Yes, I just think it's a lazy. It's shorthand, and it's not like it's not a good shorthand. Like you're really not asking your audience to put like any. You're not challenging your audience at
How
all
would
to.
you have prefer he set up his world? Just like don't
Um,
bring up the god?
No, see, that's sort of the thing about isekai is actually the world transmigration isn't actually really necessary. Like, people will like sort of be like, no, Goblin Slayer isn't isekai, even though it follows all of the isekai trends, except there is no world transmigration. You just have like this idea of actually this entire world is actually just a tabletop game by people. Like, and so that's not even like even if there were no world
What?
transmigration
What does
elements,
that even mean?
so
Tabletop
world
game by
transmigration
people.
usually you'll have so there are sort of two sort of categories of world transmigration. You have reincarnation and portal isekai. And so portals, obviously like magical constructs that
So
teleport you
it's
from
like
one place.
you're born into the world versus you choose to go into the world.
Reincarnate is well, there's a caveat to the born into because long before
Well,
isekai, there's
don't get too deep into the details. Just like
yes,
get general with it, right?
if anyone wants me to go on for literally hours about this, find me on Discord. I'll put whatever my identification number is. I don't like to be DM'd, but just if you want to see me go on about it for literally ever, then
I'm
yes,
sure
I can.
we'll get more into it in future isekai videos.
Anyway, yes. So reincarnation and portals are the two sort of world transmigration migration methods that people utilize, which is, a person goes from one world to another. And theoretically, this means you could have so much creativity in that the world that you're coming from can be literally anything, and then the world you're going to can be literally anything. For some unfathomable reason, isekai always go, the first world that you're coming from is our world, and you're usually an otaku or an everyman, and then the second world is always a Tolkien fantasy. And so like you're already like not even utilizing any creativity that could be inherent in that premise. So you've
Well, I
already
mean, I
stripped out
feel
literally
like this
everything.
is sort of, I don't
I
know how
mean,
to
so,
say this without insulting you. I
go
feel
ahead,
like you're
whatever.
trying to ask people to not enjoy the thing they enjoy.
So this is
It's
why
like
I had
you've
to.
got a kid in front of you, and he's eating a bag of ice cream, and you're like, "Oh, a bag of ice cream." But you know what
If
I'm
I notice
saying,
that
right? Like you're slapping the ice cream out of his hand. You're saying, "Why
if
don't you eat broccoli, you dumbass?" It's like,
if
listen,
the ice
dude.
cream is made of rotten milk, then yes, I will say, hey,
People enjoy
there's
this
this.
transit. People like and I think this show especially does a really good job of taking what is a real world philosophy, this desire
Well,
for just like an easy, slow life,
yes,
and
which
translating
might be
into a sort
inherently
of
bad.
isekai fantasy world, right? I
But
think
this is also
it's hella relatable, and I think it does good job, which not all isekai do. I think it does a good job sort of tying Azusa being the main character,
I don't
tying
care.
her real life, so to speak, her first life
I
into her
think
second life. It carries into her philosophy. It carries into, how she behaves with other people, right?
I don't think she has much of a character. Like I can hardly consider I was overworked and then I died, and so I don't want to work very hard this time. As like the lessons that they do make out of it are nice, but also like they're not substantive. This isn't a
Well, okay,
character.
let me go through episode one before we dive too deep into
No,
this
but
because I
let me
think
let me just address that. You
okay, go
said
for it, go for it.
you said this sounds like you're just trying to knock the ice cream out of a kid's hand.
Yeah.
And well, if again, my counter to that is if the ice cream is made out of rotten milk, then yes, I will say, well, don't engage with your ice cream this way. Don't watch a show that's built on bad premise. Don't just ignore the bad premise.
I mean,
Like
every
recognize that
show is
okay,
going
this
to
is bad
have
and
its
you're enjoying the
setup, and
feeling.
a lot of shows are going to have like pretty nasty setups. And if you can't get into that,
No,
go
it's
for it. But
but I
I
am
think
trying to
to
accurately
call this
describe.
setup a nasty setup for one, I would
No,
strongly disagree. I think
you're the one attributing the word nasty. I'm saying it is flawed in a number of ways. Like it is not like a
so.
wrong way to go about things.
You
Like
don't
it's
think
not like
it's nasty, but you think it's problematic. Is that it?
I think there are whenever you're writing something like it's more complex than this is good or this is bad. Like there is a concept that you're executing on, and there's the execution level of it. Like I'm not saying you can never do God
Wait,
comes
so
down.
what? This is executing bad?
Both. I think this is both a terrible
Okay,
concept and
how
the
is
execution
this?
doesn't care. And I
Okay,
think
so
this
you're
concept.
thinking this. Okay, so let's start off with this. One, the concept, right? What is
So
the concept? The concept is you have an overworked office worker. Now, I live in America, and Japan's laws are way worse than mine. However, here in America, all the time people are talking about, oh man, you know how underpaid people are, how difficult it is to get like basic food, how oftentimes if you work like low
I'm
paid
not saying
jobs,
that this
you need to
character
work
doesn't
two or
like
three
exist,
jobs.
but I'm
So what
again,
you
it's
have this
like
very real world pain point, shall we say, and you take
you're
that
using
and you
like the idea
translate
of
it into a sort of fantasy, right?
yeah. You're using the idea of relatability as if it's like actually an adequate counter to my point that I don't think this character is very substantive.
I
But
that's not what I'm talking about. You're saying the show's premise is bad. I'm saying the
oh, in a
show's
lot of ways,
premise
yeah.
is exactly why I like it.
Okay.
I would say that the premise is the biggest selling point. In episode
And
1, the whole show is exploring this premise that I really enjoyed, right?
and like I said at the top, you enjoying it does not make my critique less accurate.
I'm not saying you're. Okay, firstly, your critique is bad. Shut up.
No,
Secondly,
that's a really dumb way to go about it. To be like, well, just shut up
no,
because
but like,
your critique
listen,
is bad because
the
I
reason
enjoyed
I'm
it.
saying I
When I
disagree
qualified at
with
the
your
very beginning
critique.
that I would be critiquing harshly, and that doesn't mean you
Yeah, but
can't
I think
enjoy
you're
it.
critiquing on bad lines. I think your critique is just wrong. If you're trying to
I
say
mean,
the okay,
you can think
let's
that.
let's back up then, right? So
Yeah.
the what part do you want to talk about first?
Oh, I mean,
The premise, the character, or what was the third thing you were talking about?
I can concede a little bit on the character. If you just really like this character, then sure. I don't care enough about that like diegetic level.
You don't
I
care enough
think,
about that.
yeah, I
Okay.
don't like a diegetic detail
Okay, well,
is
give
like
me an argument as to why your character is bad.
it's just not that considered. It's just not that well thought
It's
out. It's
not
just
consistent. It's
oh,
not thought
it's
out. What?
consistent. I didn't say inconsistent. I just think
Okay,
it's just
okay.
not much. Who cares?
Give it. Try. I'll give you like 30 seconds. Just like say what you want.
It's a self-insert. That's a I don't yeah, that's a it's just a wish fulfillment cardboard cutout that you can insert yourself onto and enjoy as for that. And I'm not saying that's like I'm not saying you should never do that, but I think that with the current trend of isekai, where almost every character is that, like, you know, you're not practicing a craft when you're just copying and pasting that idea of a character.
Okay, so the reason why I kind of disagree with you is because so I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that she's a self insert. I just don't think that makes her like less interesting as a character, really.
Sure.
I think so what episode 1 does very well is that it showcases that she has this like strong desire. She wants to live this slow, easy life. She talks to God about it. God's like, "Okay, cool, homie, I got you. Here's a fantasy world. You're an immortal 17-year-old, right?"
Yep.
Very quickly, in episode 1, it's established what kind of person she is, and primarily this is it's kind of similar to Three Gatsu no Line. You see her personality and how she interacts with others in the same way Ray, you
I mean,
see
she's
how
literally
he
just
interacts with others, right?
what a
She's
hard character to enjoy.
very
A
very
Genki girl.
Genki girl is not how I would describe it, right? She's I don't know how you would describe her. Like self-insert is very much noticeable in that she's like nice to everyone. She puts herself to use in like making herbs and potions and things. Her relationship in the village, the reason why I emphasize that is because in episode 1 especially, I think it kind of ties to this fantasy that the author is trying to show, right? The fantasy being the slow, easy life. And I think this is something that like every office worker in Japan is sort of thinks about. It's like, oh man, one day I wanna just like go to the countryside, live in a fucking farm, right? I think everyone has had like a moment where like the idea of like trees and nature and like a small like sort of homely village that's like not really rich and not very big.
Yeah,
I
sure. I'm
think
not saying
there
which is
there's a
always
lot
appealing.
there to really like, and I think at least in episode 1 the author really sells this fantasy, right? Azusa really does land in sort of her ideal village, and you see her go about what I would consider to be her ideal life, right? She spends every single day killing 25 slimes. She has a field that she tends to, and then for the most part her day consists of lazing about. And that to me, it was sort of like why I really liked it is like, okay, on the tin right off the bat you establish that she died from overworking herself. She goes to a new life. What does she do? She doesn't overwork herself. Fantastic. You've connected me to the character, right? You've given me some level of relatability, and you've established like the sort of philosophy of the show, right? The philosophy is going to get upturned later, and it stops mattering real quick. But it was really like my favorite part of the show was episode 1, and the reason was because of this like underlying theme of like hard work and stuff, and it gets explored deeper in like the second half of the show. Like the what I was talking about, the village, her establishing her life, that's maybe the first like I want to say 5 minutes. The rest of the show, and really the majority of the show, is her interacting with shall we say, adventurers of varying sorts, right?
The
People,
episode, yeah. Did you say show or episode?
the show. In episode one, she encounters this. So she finds out that, oh no, she's level like maxed out. She's like
And
99 or whatever, right? And she gets worried that, oh no, this is going to threaten her slow, easy life. And
yeah,
of
the
course,
barest minimum of conflict.
yeah. So and of course, the way writing works is like this is the one thing she wants. This is the one thing she wants to hold on to. Of course, we challenge that, right?
Hmm.
So adventurers come to her house. She beats them up. A big ass dragon comes to her house. She beats them up. Or she beats the dragon up.
The dragon
Uh,
becomes a maid girl.
the dragon becomes a very cute girl who wears a maid outfit. I'm here for it. Listen, I got no problems here. Uh, what comes next is what I thought was really interesting. What I thought the show was going to be about. So the dragon, while she's fighting Azusa, she accidentally breaks Azusa's house. And this is made to be like a big deal, right? Like Azusa is like, oh man, now I have to stay in the town at the inn. Luckily, the town all likes her, so it's not too difficult, right? But
Yeah,
like
she's
the
like
show makes a
local
point of like,
deity.
yeah, the show makes a point of being like, oh, this is sort of an inconvenience for her, right? So the dragon comes back the next day after she like sleeps in the town. She's like, yo, I'll build your house back, but in exchange, I want you to teach me how you became strong. Which to me, fantastic setup because it's sort of it's this almost One Punch Man effect, right? Where like in One Punch Man, the main hero gets strong in a very mundane and not very interesting way, right? He doesn't have any big secret to how he got strong, and you see sort of
That's not an inappropriate comparison. Yeah.
and here you have a very similar thing where I'm waiting for basically the conflict. I'm waiting for the moment where she reveals, yeah, I just like kill 25 slimes a day, right? So you've sort of set up this flag, and I'm like, all right, you've sold me on this character, and now I can see this relationship's going to be interesting. So Laika is the dragon's name. She goes out and she starts like building this house, and Azusa starts talking about like, oh man, this is great. Laika knows how to cook. She'll like help make my slow, easy life even easier, right?
Not to cut you off, but I'm gonna run out of time.
Okay, so to the way this episode ends really sold me on the show, and it's what made the show really catch my attention at first. Laika starts working on this house, and as she is working on it, it starts getting dark. And she's building, she's like cutting trees. You see her working and stuff. And Azusa calls her. She's like, "Yo, it's almost night. Do you want to go home? Right? Go sleep with me in the village." Laika's like, "Don't worry, dragons can see in the dark, so I'm just gonna work all night." And Azusa, what she does is she sort of grabs her and she's like, "That's definitely a no." Right? And it's a very
Yeah, she puts her
strong
foot down.
grab. What?
Yeah, she puts her foot down. Just the phrasing. It's
Yeah,
used.
yeah, yeah. She gets in the way she looks in this. What I really like is that she looks really upset. Like, yo, why would you do that? Sort of that. Like she gives her this like look, and she like scolds like, ah, I didn't get strong through big bursts. I got strong through moderate daily efforts. If you do it in bursts, you're gonna hurt yourself, right? And this is like a philosophy that I think is very agreeable, right? But
That's also like
you can totally
at
understand
the
why
in-universe
Laika.
level. That's silly. But go ahead.
Sorry, what did you say?
I mean, she's a literal dragon. She can put in that much work, and it's
Well, that's
like
exactly the problem.
no,
She's lives in this fantasy world, and so
this,
she's been raised under this sort of mantra of
I
put
didn't
as much
want to
effort.
actually contradict. I didn't want to like argue about it, but yeah. The thematic point they're making is poignant. Like even my friends who are mostly critical of anime have have touched on that point and been like, okay, yeah, that's nice. But I'm just like, you're really cutting your audience like no slack. Like you don't you're not you don't think of your audience as very thoughtful people. If your lesson is like, hey, magical dragon, you're gonna overwork yourself if you do like more than a regular human can.
I wouldn't
You
call
know,
it a
it's just
lesson. I would say it's a theme of the show, and
I would call
what I
it
was
yes,
interested
theme and a
in.
lesson, yes, because it's like it's a child's level of writing where you have a problem and you solve it and that's the end of your day. This writing is bad.
Well, I would disagree for this specific episode. I think it's a good lesson. I think it's a
I'm
very
not saying it's a
smart
bad
thing to
lesson.
show.
I'm just saying you
No, but
wrote like
like,
a
even
lesson
if
for
it's
like a
like a child,
5-year-old.
everyone's been a kid once, haven't they? And even if you
I
weren't,
think
you
I
have
think
to, you
if
have
your counter argument to me saying that this is like a child's lesson is that well everyone was a kid once. I think
No,
that's
I'm just
goofy
saying,
because
like
kids
even
can
adults have
understand like
something to
more
learn
complex
from
media.
this.
Oh,
I think it's a good I think it's a good episode. I think the morality and the themes are obviously very positive.
yeah, I
It,
would say a kid would not get anything from this. They understand that basic ass level of logic, and they could be given
do
more
you think
complex
so?
media.
Do you really think so?
Yes, I do. I think kids do not get enough credit, and they can understand like super complicated media.
So
Every
so
single time I've
so
come across people saying,
when you
"Well,
go to
if you're
work,
complaining, this is for
you're
kids."
definitely going to know your limits, and you're definitely not going to overwork yourself at all. That's what you're saying. That's great. That's fantastic. For a lot of
I'm
people,
just
that's
saying,
not the
like,
case.
as a
And
bit of media, it could be like more complex than this,
I
level
don't
of.
think it needs to. I think if you made
Oh,
it
it
more
does. Okay,
complex,
yeah,
it
that's
would
true.
lose something special.
It
I
doesn't
think the
need to be more
focus
complex.
and
No,
the characters are really well done.
I just prefer. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'm a bit of an elitist. I want media to be a little more, you know, a little less isekai and a little more literally anything else, please.
Well, that's good. Anyways, you said you needed to go, so we'll stop there.
Yeah, I'm
I
busy.
could talk more about Third Line, but to be honest, after episode one, it goes downhill real fast.
Oh yeah,
This
you have like the two lowly girls who join, and then the big titty elf who gets aphrodisiac
the
drugged
titty
by
elf is the funny one
which
for
is
sure.
like
The lowly
honestly a
girls
bad
I
joke.
actually really enjoyed. I think their story was pretty good.
Anyway, this
But
is a
anyways,
story that has been done better in like 50 million other things. Watch it if you like isekai and want to turn your brain off, I guess.
watch it for the first episode and really enjoy it, and then if you want to turn off your brain, you can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with just enjoying a show. But if you're going to like come to bat for it, like have something complex to say instead of
Have
just I
something
enjoyed
complex
it.
to say. I'm
Yes, I
telling you
think
why I enjoyed it. I'm running through the episode. I'm pointing out
no, no,
why I
no.
think
I
it was
didn't think
good.
your arguments were necessarily bad. I just don't
Oh,
think
my
that the show
arguments are
is
not.
very
Shut
creative.
the fuck up, dude.
I
I
mean,
swear to God, piss me off.
if you want to if you want to just go straight into like
Okay?
animosity
Do you
about
need
it,
to
that's
go right
fine.
now? Because I think there is one quick thing we should do, and I think that's
Yeah, why not? Go ahead.
to draw a
I
sort
can
of
delay.
comparison between them. And I think something that's sort of notable.
Okay.
So in terms of like why I might like want to be critical of 300 Slime, I think there is a certain issue with the main character's fantasy, this slow, easy life. And I think you can probably tell what it is because it compares sort of inversely to 3 Gatsu no Lion or 3 to March, the
Yeah,
other show.
I don't think that you were necessarily wrong in what comparisons you've already made. So yeah, yeah, go ahead.
So the way Azusa's lifestyle sort of leads out is she basically does the same thing every single day for 300 years. And I'm sure it doesn't take an expert psychiatrist to tell you that's probably not healthy at all.
Well, I mean, if we're going into that level, like there's so many things throughout this show that are
No,
like
I'm
silly.
not saying it's a problem with the show because the
Okay,
show is
no,
trying to
okay, yeah,
sell a
that's fine.
fantasy. But
If you
if we're
don't want to look at it
comparing two
as though,
pieces of media, right? I think it's really cool that you know uh, maybe this is something to do with like the stigma of mental health. Maybe this is more to do with like fantasy is maybe not what you all be careful what you wish for sort of thing. But as Ray sort of has Azusa's ideal life in a lot of ways, in that he has like some level of independence. He can sort of he's not being like pushed really hard or overworked, right? But he's very much still suffering. And I just thought it was interesting to like compare these two. This guy's got a job in Japan, or sorry, this girl's got a job in Japan, and all she ever wants to do is get away from it. even if it's considered like a good job. I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate to that, who just like, want to get away. And but the thing is, like, if you did get away, if you didn't have your job, probably she would find herself lonely, maybe a little bored, maybe a little depressed. There is something to be said about like the human psychiatry, where like we want to move towards stillness and not a lot happening, and we sort of fantasize about it, and we make a point to move in that direction of like an easy life. But an easy life is not necessarily a good life, right? It sort of comes with its own troubles.
It already suspends disbelief for me that like she went from having all the entertainment in the world to just killing slime every day for like 90,000 days.
That's what you
Like,
get stuck on.
I mean, when like this sort of ties into if you wanted to hit me where it hurt, you would like say, well, Three Gatsu also has elements of wish fulfillment, and isn't that what you're basically arguing against? And I would say yes.
No, I got no problem with wish
Yeah,
fulfillment.
no. See, you
My
don't. There's no
problem,
problem with
I
it
don't
because
have a problem with either show. I think they're both
no, I do.
really well done.
I have a problem if it is so contrived as to be in the form of God coming down after you died and saying, "Well, let's give you everything you want." Then I that's where I have an issue with it. Where I think in Three Gatsu it feels real. Like I can suspend disbelief.
I
In
wasn't trying
Slime,
to talk about fucking three. I was trying to make a point about like people that had nothing to do with like.
oh, yeah, I'm making a different point. I'm saying if you're like obviously I started off on like a bad foot with slime, and that's sort of what I'm trying to illustrate here is that like I was out of my suspension was killed from the moment God came down. Because if you talk if God is talking like a goddamn pervy 30-year old man, then I'm gonna be like, well, I mean, this is obviously written by some old dude who sucks, and that's like it's not a good foot to start a show on, you know. And if anyone relates to that, then we might get along. And if you don't, that's fine. I'm not saying
Cool,
everyone has to have the
cool,
same read of
cool.
the show.
Anyways, oh, we didn't talk about Found Family at all. Ah, whatever.
I mean, yeah,
It wasn't that
the elements are
important.
there. People probably got it. I
Yeah,
hope.
feel free to pick up both shows, compare for yourself. Hey, you
Or
find analysis can really be done by anyone for any
I mean,
reason.
that wasn't
If
analysis. That
you,
was a lot review.
yeah, it's you summarize and you analyze and you go through a show as you watch it, don't you?
I would call. I've said it. I've said it in like the first ep, and I'll say it again. I don't necessarily want like to do reviews because I feel like if you're reviewing something, like just watch it. But when it comes
Well,
to
to
something like
to make a
slime,
point, you kind of got to do your homework a little bit. You got to set the
oh yeah, no,
stage. You
totally.
can't,
I mean,
I can't talk about like, the themes of, depression without first talking about how the show talks about depression, can I?
totally. But I mean, I'm sure everyone who knows me knows that I'm the first person who will say you have to actually get into it yourself if you want to talk about stuff. Because, like, I've done my homework as far as watching things and, engaging about them.
All right, so basically, before you watch our next podcast episode, watch the show, and then we'll talk
Watch
about it.
Gatsu and do something else that is worth your time that isn't watching Isekai, please.
Watch episode 1 of the Isekai. It's really good.
If you like this Isekai, there's a bunch of Saintess Isekai, and those are pretty like those are tend to be that same through line of overworked lady teleports to a new world, but instead of written by a man, they're usually written by women, and they're usually much better for that. You know,
What the hell does that have to do with anything?
I'm just saying there are much better anime that do the same thing and much better. I mean, hell, we had a Saintess anime like this last season. I didn't think it was very good, but it's one of the many that are much
Okay,
better.
it's not very good, but watch it anyways.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're gonna watch the worst thing, one of the worst things I've ever seen, yeah, sure. Then pick the thing that is slightly better than that and the same.
How would you feel if I told you on Crunchyroll both of these shows have a rating of 4.9?
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't care. Like the Western anime community and how they like rate stuff is so
Crunchyroll
like
anime is not Crunchyroll reviews is not the best source of
yeah. There's
anime
not a lot of
reviews.
thought put into those votes. Like Western anime audiences are not great. I have to go. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone.